Alrighty, it is the 20th of February. This is the PFF Forecast. This is our last forecast before the Combine, which is exciting.
Yes.
The music for the Combine that they play on the commercial gets me very hyped up.
Really?
Yeah, I really like that music. I think it's underrated. Anyways, we're going to talk about the NFL schedule changes. I'm going to try and convince Eric that it would have meant the Chiefs didn't win the Super Bowl. So that should be fun. We've got some news on Drew Brees, Darius Slay, Stephon Diggs, and Greg Olsen. We're going to talk about that, what it means. Do the Bengals trade down and tank? Or do they stick with
I thought they already tanked.
With Joe Burrow? We've got some Isaiah Simmons talk, and then a little XFL Week 3, which is going to get me really excited. So, let's rock it out here. Let's start with the NFL schedule. So the big change is that the playoffs next year will be different.
Yeah.
You looked at me like I was wrong. No, that's the change that will happen next year. So it would be 2 and 7 seeds. 2 and would play seed 7. Seed 7 would not have made the playoffs last year, and they would make the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
And then the only bye would go to the number 1 seeded team.
Right.
Which means that we would have had games between Kansas City and Pittsburgh, and Green Bay, and the Los Angeles Rams. What are your big takeaways from this part of the change?
This is very similar in many ways to the way that the playoffs used to be prior to the expansion in 1990. Back in the day, the reason that the first round is called the wild card round and the second round is called the divisional round is because when there were 5 teams per, all 3 division winners got byes, and then the 2 wild cards played in the first round. The 2 and 3 seeds both got byes but played each other in the second round, right? So it's very similar except for the fact that, basically the 2 and 3 seeds-ish would be playing in the second round without a bye, now, which of course makes their chances of making the Super Bowl lower because they got across the street once on the way. But I don't think it's in a strange way, I do think it makes the number 1 seed more likely to make the Super Bowl. And we saw that. I mean, there was only 1 team prior to playoff expansion in the history of the NFL that was a wild card team that even made the Super Bowl, and 0 that won it. So I do think while you are expanding the playoffs, you are making it more difficult for the teams that are wild cards / not even like non-bye teams to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about that is that obviously 2 teams with a bye made the Super Bowl this year.
And have done so since 2012.
Right, and the last team that even won, the Ravens were the team that won it, having played in the wild card round, and that was ages ago, and that was with Joe Flacco, and after being sprinkled with fairy dust. What is interesting about this, though, is that Kansas City would have had to play Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh was not a good team, right? It would have been Duck Hodges or Mason Rudolph or whatever. But that's not the point. Say they win by 20. I don't care about that. What I do care about is that they had to play. They didn't get an entire week off. They didn't get to rest. Andy Reid didn't have a chance to prepare for all of the playoffs. That 1 week is so massive. And it doesn't mean that I think they wouldn't have made it to the Super Bowl. My question is, does it make them much worse of a team? Once they're in the Super Bowl, they have played an extra game.
I don't think it makes them. So the key and the cool thing about the Super Bowl is that both teams get a bye going into it. So I don't think that winning the Super Bowl would have been any less likely. I think making it would have been. I think the 49ers would have had an even better chance of making the Super Bowl than they had this year. And the Chiefs, by virtue of needing to cross the road one more time. Let's even say.
But here's the thing. They played the Texans and the Titans.
Yeah. But that's again the same. The whole thing plays out the same if the 2 seed wins.
I get it.
Yeah, so
I'm not saying it's playing out any differently. My thing is playing in an NFL game is an undertaking.
Yeah,
you get nicked up.
But that's what I'm saying. Making it to the bye, I think the bye alleviates a great deal of the issues. So I agree with you that they had a lower chance of making it to the Super Bowl but I don't think that they would have had a smaller chance of winning pending they make it, because they get a bye anyway. It's the making the Super Bowl part that's an issue, right? Because both teams
they have a way better chance of being banged up and injured, right? So there's a better chance that Tyreek Hill is injured.
But how much more of it?
Patrick Mahomes is injured, or
but you're talking. So again,
coming from a guy that has had a calf strain for more than 2 weeks, it's interesting that you're trying to convince me that 2 weeks just like alleviates all.
No,
of
but
the...
but I would say I agree with you in the sense that like I think it does have an effect, but it's a far bigger. So like let's assume that the Chiefs were, what would they be against Pittsburgh at home? Probably 13-point favorites, right? Because they were 10-ish point favorites against Houston.
13.5, yeah.
And so you're talking, I mean, even if you say like very, very liberally that they have a 90-10 chance of winning that game, like that's, so that takes them from a 25% to win the Super Bowl down to a 22.5%. That's the bigger jump. Once they get there, I agree with you that there's a trace chance that there's an injury that happens in that first week, or there's a residual effect that happens the second and third week. But I don't think it's that big in magnitude, especially because we talked about this going into the playoffs. The injuries that we see, like Juan Thornhill tears his ACL in week 17, had a terrific season, worth a third of a win above replacement, and ultimately it probably mattered a little bit, but it's going to come down to, is your quarterback healthy? Are his weapons healthy? And does it matter all that much? And so I agree with you, it probably has a small effect, but the biggest effect is the probability of simply not making the Super Bowl in the first place.
The 49ers would have been Super Bowl champions had this stupid rule been put in place, and I'm pissed off about it. The Packers-Rams game would have been the far more interesting one.
Right, because the Rams would have given the Packers a game, because the Rams are actually pretty talented.
That would have been a real game. What do you think the spread would have been in that game?
In Lambeau Field, oh man, I think it would have been probably -4.5.
Ooh, I think that's what it should have been. My guess is that it would have been a little higher than that.
And I would have smashed.
Yeah, I would have taken the Rams.
Yeah, I would have smashed. So because the only reason I say that is because I almost said St. Louis. The Los Angeles Rams are 6-point underdogs when they went to San Francisco in week 16, covered that. San Francisco, as we found out, is a much better team than the Green Bay Packers, but the Green Bay Packers have a little bit better home field advantage. I don't know. Well, and here's the thing. Who's the better running back? Aaron Jones. So, you sort of decide at the end there to go with.
I mean, it would have been. What's really interesting about that is it's Lafleur versus McVeigh, and I mean, people were excited about Matt Lafleur because they went 13-3. I was not overly excited about him, given that their offense, was just.
If you take
what you had with McCarthy, so there's this bigger brother, little brother dynamic when you have, McVeigh, Lafleur, and that game is legitimately interesting. And then you have kind of a shakeup on the NFC side, right? So you would have, so the Seahawks would have been the highest seed, right? Because the Vikings.
Well, so
the Saints.
Yeah, Minnesota beat the Saints. Well, right. So if somehow the Rams would have beaten the Packers, then right. So that's the tricky thing. So now the 2 seed is not guaranteed to have a home play, and so you could get a wild card team is that true though? Yeah, right. Because there are 3 wild card teams. So 5, if all 3 wild card teams win, so there's a chance that a wild card team could host the second round of the playoffs.
So the Seahawks are playing at home.
Yeah,
against the Rams. That's a good game too.
Yeah.
The Seahawks are favored. Maybe the Seahawks win.
Seahawks Rams is a great Thursday night football game. Yeah.
The Seahawks win. The Seahawks actually gave the Niners a hell of a game twice.
Yep.
So I just think this is great because it gives you more. It obviously gives you more games to watch, more games to bet on, more things to talk about. That's awesome. But it also gives there a little bit more parity, more chances of kind of craziness happening, which I think is good. Here's the other question that I have. I've been going back and forth on this. Do you think it makes the regular season, at the end of the regular season, more or less interesting?
More. I mean, because you've seen what happens in baseball. In baseball, the addition to the playoffs in baseball are nowhere near as tangible as this, right? Because in baseball, it's a one-game playoff. And yet, like, baseball used to be this sport where, like, 80% of the teams were meaningless by July. Yeah. And now you have even, like, these god-awful 86-win teams have a chance to play for a one-game play-in, and people are compelled, as compelled as they can be about baseball. And in the NFL, you get the equivalent of a 7-game series, even if you're the 7th seed, right? So it is great. The interesting thing, which I think will be fun to talk about, is the jockeying for position will be even more fierce, because when we were watching Week 17, I was elated that the Chiefs got the 2 seed, right? The fact that they were like 2 games away from the 1 seed was like immaterial. I didn't care, right? Like I
just wanted the bye.
Yeah. You just wanted the bye because the bye was really the indicator variable, right? It has been for years. But now the bye is the indicator variable, but it's 1 seed, it's singular.
Team.
And I personally, and I know you like it because it probably would have made the Niners a better chance to win the Super Bowl.
I'm thinking about how different our walk to find a taxi cab is when I'm the one on Twitter.
I thank God every day my calf wasn't like hurt when.
Oh my God!
Can you imagine that?
For those of you, by the way, that are listening that have no idea what's happened, Eric strained his calf. He thought it was a Kevin Durant-esque injury. We don't need to relive that. The point is that I believe it's getting worse. Your stagger, it's not even really a limp, it's a stagger that you've been kind of putzing around with, in my opinion, is getting more pronounced.
Look,
I'm worried that it's having a negative effect. You're wearing 2 collars right now.
I am.
I'm not wearing a single one. You're wearing 2 collars.
I had to make up for that.
I'm worried the drugs are having an effect on you. No, but
I think it matters. Now what's cool, and I think sometimes the playoffs, so it's very much this way in the NCAA basketball. The playoffs are a tough nut to crack because you want it to be small enough so that the best team wins the majority of the time, or a plurality of the time, a fair amount of time. But you want them to be big enough to include the best team all the time. And like I always think about the 2010 Packers. The 2010 Packers were the best team in the NFL, but because they had injuries and lost 6 games by 4 points or less, they were 10-6 and got the 6th seed. They would not have made the playoffs in the old system. Now they make the playoffs and they win. Like, that's good. You want the best team in the playoffs, but you also want the best team to win it a fair amount of time. And sometimes in some tournament structures, the best team doesn't win it enough, in my opinion. And in this structure, the best team probably will win it more often than not, which I think is a just outcome. Like, they still have to earn it on the field, but I do think giving away 1 bye, like the Baltimore Ravens were 2 games better than any team in the AFC this year. Like, they deserve a game off.
There's just no way that adding another football game on the first weekend of the playoffs is bad.
Yeah.
Like, you can't make that.
Especially if you like the XFL. As you said on Twitter.
You really just going to steal that from me? I was setting that up the whole time. I was going to talk about it right here, and you just fucking snatched it from me. You asshole. Jesus. I had 1 good line this entire podcast.
You've had a bunch of good lines. I'm sorry.
I agree with you, though. In general, it makes the regular season more exciting, and that's what you want. At the end of the regular season, very seldom do we see the 1 and 2 seeds care that much, because it's like, well, I'm not going to risk injury for this trace chance of getting the 1 seed. But where it really matters is those games between teams that are teetering on mediocrity, potentially overcoming injuries, trying to squeak into the playoffs. Those are the ones that become exciting. And Week 17 desperately needs that. We have only seen a couple of games kind of matter in Week 17. The game last year obviously was great between the Niners and the Seahawks, but the year before was this god-awful game between Blaine Gabbert and Andrew Luck.
And the year before that, there wasn't even a game. It wasn't even a Sunday Night Football game. And again, I also think it makes jockeying for the other seeds important too, because generally speaking, the difference between the 3 and 4 seed is trivial. Like we saw, was it 2017? I think we used this as one of our bets, but like the Rams had the 4 seed sewn up, but there was a legitimate chance they could get the 3 seed, but McVeigh rested his starters because you didn't see a huge difference between the 3 seed and the 4 seed. And a lot of that stems from the fact there isn't that much of a difference between the 1 seed and the 2 seed in the old system. So But now it's like, well, the difference between the 3 and 4 seed is legitimate because if the 2 seed falls in the first round, then like the 3 seed then gets a freaking home game in the second round. And so there's
that really matters.
There's even more of a and then the 4 seed doesn't even have to play the 1 seed, all that kind of stuff. Like there's actual like tangible benefits in working out this way. And to my earlier point, the best team still has the highest probability of winning the Super Bowl, and by a wide margin.
Oh, it only gets bigger.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And so it increases the incentive structure in the regular season for more teams, which is a good thing.
Yes. The one addition that I would like to make, and we're going to talk about very briefly the addition that is then proposed for the following season, which is a 17th game. The addition that I would also like to make is that the higher seed, so the 2 seed, gets to choose first which of the teams they want to play. And then the 3 seed gets to choose of the 2 remaining wildcard teams which team they want to play. And that way you've got this built-in animosity. So let's say there's a big gap here.
We want Bama.
So Kansas City has a huge gap between them and Pittsburgh, right? There's no doubt about it. But let's say they choose Pittsburgh. Hey, Pittsburgh, you're the team we want to play. That's the type of edge that the Steelers need to make that game a little more exciting. I just think that would be an awesome addition. That'd be so great. I don't know that you need to do that in the second round necessarily, have the first seed get to select who they want to play, but I think that'd be awesome. I think it adds gamesmanship. It adds a sense of like matchup, things to talk about. We would sit there and we go like, who would you choose, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is legitimately fascinating. It would implement, I think, new ways of people leveraging data to make choices about who they want to play, because it really matters. So that'd be an addition I'd like to see. Would you co-sign?
For sure. I mean, the thing is like there's the smart teams get to figure it out then, right? Like how you match up with another team could, like if you're Baltimore, for example, do you want to play the Tennessee Titans, or do you want to play, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, no, you know who they want to play? The Houston freaking Texans.
Exactly.
That's who they want to play.
That's what I'm saying. Or like, there are other matchups, right? Like Kansas City, do you want to play, like,
they're choosing Duck Hodges.
Yeah, they're choosing Duck Hodges. But you know what I'm saying? Like there are matchups. There are teams that match up differently than other teams. For example, Seattle, San Francisco, I think the gap between quality in those two teams is substantial. But when they get on the field together, it's a lot closer than it ever should be.
San Francisco isn't choosing Seattle.
Yeah, they're
choosing Minnesota.
Exactly. Exactly. Because Minnesota is the gap between Minnesota and San Francisco, people are going to say this is stupid because Seattle beat Minnesota, but bear with me. The gap between San Francisco and Minnesota is smaller than the gap between San Francisco and Seattle, but Seattle matches up so much better with San Francisco that they would probably prefer Minnesota.
That's why quarterbacks matter.
Well, quarterbacks matter. And
I mean, that's what it is. Kirk Cousins is not doing anything to elevate himself above the ability of his team. But you look at the
21 starters on Minnesota relative to the 21 starters on Seattle other than QB, but it's not even close.
But the point is, and I agree with you, but the point is not that. It's that there is a large gap between both teams.
Yeah.
And only one team, is that me?
That's you, man.
What the fuck? I'm on edge today. I'm tilted by a few people that have drawn my ire. And now my computer's misbehaving. The point is not that either one is close to the Niners. Both are far away. It's that only one team has a quarterback that is capable of elevating either of those two, not great teams into a spot where they can compete with a great team.
What I love about this, though, and this is, again, like not to talk about the XFL too much, but what I really like about new leagues or new rules, and this is a great league that's getting a new rule, is it makes us think about the game we love again. The best part about new rules is it makes us reevaluate our assumptions. When they moved the kickoff from the 30 to the 35, it changed the way we thought about the game.
Yep.
When they moved the touchback from the 20 to 25, when they moved the extra point from the 20 to the 33, this makes us think about the game in an intelligent way, and it builds the offseason up.
Do you think they're just trying to steal the news cycle back from the Major League Baseball bullshit? Because that's been really exciting. having to talk about baseball at this time of the year when usually we don't get to, bitch and moan about it until like pitchers and catchers, and then like opening day, and then for the next.
So
all the web gems.
Here's a diversion for a second. What would you do if you were in charge of Major League Baseball with respect to the Astros?
Oh,
neither one of us has opined on this to each other.
I mean, I just think it's such a phrase I haven't used in a really long time. It's such a bitch-made move. Banging on trash cans, using an Excel. What really triggered me was that they acted like using an Excel program.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the phrasing they used was fucking sent me into orbit. I was like, this is how analytics is getting labeled, some douchebag on an Excel spreadsheet. I would have suspended as many players as I could confirm cheated, and the problem is that they probably would have had a hard time confirming the cheating without giving them anonymity, at least from what I know.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about baseball. No one is talking about baseball. It's a dying sport. I hate going and watching baseball games. It's not fun until like the World Series.
Well, that Reds game we went to, we didn't even watch the game.
Right. I have no idea what happened in that game. I couldn't tell you one thing that happened in that game. So this was the best thing that's happened for Major League Baseball since steroids.
In my opinion, I think that this is getting. I agree with you that I don't think you can suspend all the players. This is an airing out. This is a white light on the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And the fact that having to watch the Astro players play again is the league sort of like
it's awesome.
It's the overarching like penalty for the league. Like the fact that this black mark has to be carried through the entire season is bad.
No one is watching a week 2 of the Major League Baseball season Astros game if this doesn't happen.
Here's what I really love about this.
But now every Jose Altuve at bat is going to be leading Sports Center. It's the best thing that's happened to baseball. I think they may have set it up themselves.
Here's the greatest thing about it. So the Astros have one of the smarter analytics groups in all of Major League Baseball, and this entire thing has undermined analytics. True. And so people are going to take the wrong. People are going to take the wrong conclusion from this, which is, analytics aren't actually that important.
Yeah.
And that's an opportunity.
No, you're right. You're very right. All right. The other change to the schedule would be a 17th game. And you have some thoughts on what that 17th game should be?
I do. I think it would be cool if the 17th game, because the problem that I have no issue with expanding the playoffs. I have a small issue with expanding the schedule, and here's why. I don't have an issue with the players playing 17 games if they're compensated. But the way that it goes now, you have 2 conferences, right, of 16 teams, 2 to the 4th power. You have 8 divisions, 2 to the 3rd power, of 4 teams, 2 to the 2nd power. You have 16 games, right? The way that it works now, you play 6 games against your own division, 4 against an AFC division, 4 against an NFC division, and then the 2 that are left over are where you finished, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
It all makes sense. So where does that stray 17th game come from? And to me, I think
struggling there.
What's that?
You're struggling there to find a mathematically applicable.
Well, to me, I think it has to be a yearly, and of course, this is not going to work greatly because you play at AFC, the same team in the AFC every 4 years, but it has to be an AFC rivalry game for an NFC team and vice versa. So, for example, Kansas City versus Green Bay is a pretty good rivalry. Kansas City used to train in Wisconsin in the preseason. They're relatively geographically close. Obviously, the Jets-Giants would be a good one. Rams-Chargers would be a natural one. It gets a little trickier when you start to talk about other teams and stuff like that. But you could create this sort of sub-rivalry of 2 teams that play each other every single year.
I don't disagree with you. Some other rivalries that I thought of.
Okay.
Greg Robinson versus Border Patrol.
Oh.
I would really enjoy watching that.
The one that I used was Josh Allen versus completion percentage.
I don't know if you know this. His completion percentage went way up now that he throws the ball way shorter.
Yeah, well, weird.
Which is interesting. Another good one would be Phillip Rivers versus contraception. That would be a rivalry from different conferences.
What about
interesting?
What about Antonio Brown versus functioning synapses?
Dude, if you have not watched Antonio Brown's music videos, you need to go. He just put out a music video for a song called Andrew Luck. Dude, I can't even explain it to you. You just have to go watch it. It's the fucking worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And I love Antonio Brown from a like entertainment standpoint.
Right.
And as a football player, like he's awesome. This is tough to watch. This is very tough to watch. What are some other good ones?
Todd Gurley versus Cartilage.
Stop. That's brutal.
Drew Brees versus a gust of wind. Bruce Arians versus the Sun's rays.
Yeah, you're really on fire here. I have some that are written down somewhere if I can find them. Oh man, where did they go? I don't know where I put them. I thought I had more, but maybe not. I like the Bruce Arians versus the Sun's rays. That was a good one too. I really like that addition that you had.
Kirk Cousins versus puberty.
Oh man,
Is that hot?
yeah, that's a good one. I have one about Aaron Hernandez. I'm not going to say that one.
I think you've already said it just by throwing it out there.
We'll lay that one to rest. Yeah, so that's good. Ready to move on?
Baseball versus relevancy.
Let's move on. All right, let's run through this some of this news real quick. So Drew Brees comes back, and my question to you is this. Does Drew Brees need more help to win a Super Bowl, or can they win it as they are?
Of course they can. They're not going to be as likely to win the Super Bowl as they were going into the playoffs last year unless they get him help.
I think it's to the point where the help they need to give him is just him to get more rest. And I don't know how that happens, but like
load management for quarterbacks.
Week 16 and 17 last year, like the dude fell off a cliff from a PFF grading standpoint, and they just don't attack the deep levels of the field. And in the playoffs, you have just more opportunity to face defenses that are thinking really critically about what your weaknesses are. They don't stretch the field that way. I mean, looking at the heat maps that Timo creates to show like where you're attacking down the field, throughout the field, everything for the Saints past 15 yards is below league average, except like out to the sidelines.
Right.
So they're not attacking the seams. They're not attacking the middle of the field deep. And to me, that's a huge issue for them. So I would say that in order for them to be the best team, coming out of the NFC with the best chance to win the Super Bowl, they have to get more help, or else it's going to be another one of these, Drew Brees is this old, he's played this many games, and then we're in a situation where you watch the game and you go, you know what? They need to play Taysom Hill more, and we're like right back where we are before.
Taysom Hill was the best player against the Vikings.
That was my point.
Yeah,
I walked away from that game, and I thought the reason they lost this game was they didn't play Taysom Hill enough.
Which is not a good place to be in.
No, it's not. But I still think that here's the thing with Drew Brees is that his accuracy is transcendent. I mean, the guy had a 141 passer rating throwing to the intermediate level of the field. You have Michael Thomas, who just attacks that level like nothing else. And you have Sean Payton, who is still one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL. So they're going to be there. It's just if you're trying to beat like the great teams, you've got to be able to attack the deep level of the field.
This is the exact same thing this is the same thing as like the baseball discussion was 15 years ago with the Oakland A's. It's like if you have high on base percentage and pitch, have decent depth in your pitching staff, right? You can win 100 out of 162 games, but can you win the playoff games when you need home runs and an ace, right? Like
it's true.
The Saints are good enough to dink and dunk their way to 13 wins. We've seen that. The question is when you play a little bit better defenses and offenses that can capitalize on the fact that you're not as explosive, like can you win the 3 games you need to win the Super Bowl? And so far in the Brees era, that has happened one time. And the one time, we talk about rule changes, like when they immediately changed the overtime rule right after the Saints beat the Vikings in the NFC Championship game, sort of the same thing. But like, the Saints have won one Super Bowl, and it was because of turnovers in the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl that they did so. It's tough to win the way that the Saints win in the playoffs because they cross the street a million times to get to the end zone, whereas teams like the Niners and the Chiefs, for example, are big play teams.
Yep. Greg Olsen, does he move the needle for the Seahawks.
I think so. I mean, he's certainly not as good as he used to be, but from as far as Seattle at the tight end position, he's better than what they've had.
Sure, but here's the interesting thing about Greg Olsen. So there's part of me which says we don't really know because he played with a subpar quarterback play for the past 3 years, and his PFF grade, took a huge dip over the past 3 years relative to what he was before. He also got injured a lot. Now, I think part of that is the fact that Cam Newton is making him stretch out for these almost uncatchable throws, and the poor guy is getting beaten to hell. And now he's in a situation where that won't be the case. And is that going to give him a few more snaps? I mean, the guy played about 450 snaps, then another 450 snaps, and then about 700 last year. He hasn't played over 1,000 snaps in 3 years. If you can play him the right 650, 700 snaps, that really matters. And for the Seahawks, who do run the ball a ton, you say, okay, well, we're not going to make you run block a whole lot. Right, we're going to play you in situations where you can actually be useful. And when you get the pass thrown to you, it ain't going to be this thing that's like over your head where you're having to contort yourself and risk injury. It's going to be, can you win before the catch? And I think he can.
Yeah. So Seattle acquires Greg Olsen. They have Tyler Lockett already. They have DK Metcalf. Offensive line is better than it's been in the past, but not great. Jermaine Ifedi's a free agent, all that kind of stuff. What's Seattle have to do in the next 3-4 months to make the gap, which in my opinion is sizable, between them and the 49ers shrink?
They need to stop playing base defense on every play. I think that's huge, man. To me, it's about their inability to cover on the back end, and then their inability to press their advantage on the offensive end. And to me, this is a sign, if nothing else, that they're going to press that advantage a little bit more, because they're investing in a player for 1 year who's, let's face it, you're paying $7 million for him to catch passes from Russell Wilson. And if you have 3 guys like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Greg Olsen, you got to throw the ball to feed all of those mouths, right? So to me, this could be a sign that they are willing to do one of those things. Does it somehow get them to play less base on the other end? I have no idea. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, it's more tactical than it is personnel, isn't it? I mean,
I think so. You just can't have Ugo Amadi out there on Devontae Adams on 3rd and 9.
Yeah, and that personnel is a function of the approach. It's not, like if you said, okay, we need to play nickel, you're not going to have Jamar Taylor as your nickel for half the year, and then Ugo Amadi when you're playing, in the playoffs. You're going to say, well, we have to be a modern defense, and hence we have to acquire modern defensive players.
Speaking of modern defensive players, there are 2 players that are on the trade block, maybe on the trade block. One of them is Darius Slay. Now, you brought up something that was really funny about Darius Slay, which is that the Rams are interested. And my question is, are they trading like the rights to a TV script from some Hollywood writer that is on strike and has been feeding them some goodies for Darius Slay? Because they have nothing to trade. They're certainly not Todd Gurley for Darius Slay. Who says no?
Jeez.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine the Lions being like, look, what we've missed over the last few years is a bell cow running back, and that's why we went 3-12-1 this year.
And then our talking about how the Lions are going to go worst to first,
dude,
just tanks. The interesting thing about Darius Slay, and this is always my question when it comes to NFL teams trading guys or letting guys go in free agency. So Darius Slay had his lowest graded season since his rookie year last year.
Yeah.
He was also injured a little bit. Coverage we know is unstable.
Right.
So is this the Lions saying, we actually know something that others don't? We're trying to get rid of him before he has another bad year and recoup something from him? Or is this an opportunity for a team to take advantage of the fact that coverage is unstable, that maybe he was banged up, and this is a guy that is good enough based on the past 5 years of his career that you say, hey, this can really improve our coverage?
This is Richard Sherman to the 49ers, in my opinion. Like, Richard Sherman had, for him, I mean, he's had a brilliant career, but for him, his last few years in Seattle were less effective, injury prone. The Niners did a great job of scooping him up. He was a key contributor to the Super Bowl run this year. Yeah, I mean it's a good move. And I think the same thing about a lot of these guys. So there's a rumor that the Jets are going to release Truman Johnson. Like Truman Johnson has had a good career to some degree. He went to the Jets and sucked, but he could go to a team as like a also ran cornerback and have a good run or two, right? Like, and the same thing's true about Slay. Slay's had a brilliant career. His last few years have not been that great. He could go somewhere and be, not Sherman-like, but pretty damn good. And that's going to take a defense from, middle of the pack to elite.
Yeah. Is this a sign that the Lions are saying, maybe we're going to take Tua, we're going to move to the future? I actually don't think it is. I believe that Patricia just, that they think they can continue to improve without Darius Slay back there, and it allows them to play more of this defense that he wants, which is I'm the mastermind. I put you in the place you were supposed to be.
Which is not even what Belichick does. Belichick has the guy he paid. He has a horse. Is Gilmore. Here's a funny thing about the Rams. So I looked at them, and on first blush, I'm like, oh, they have $15 million in cap space. Oh, that's better than like a few teams. Here are the number of players. Their top four most highest paid players would be negative if you cut them. Goff, Donald, Gurley, Cooks. Now, you're not cutting the top two guys. And then you have other guys. Higbee is cheaper to keep than to cut. Robert Woods is cheaper to keep than to cut. Johnny Hecker, the punter, is cheaper to keep than to cut. Rob Havenstein is 5 times cheaper to keep than to cut. Their situation with Robert Woods is the same.
They're in a
rough spot. And what's even worse is that Jalen Ramsey, you traded 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey without the guarantee. You didn't sign him right away. Mm-hmm. So now you're sitting here like, this dude comes to the negotiation table and lays his balls on the table. He's like, look, you have no leverage here at all.
Zero chance that you can let him walk.
There's zero chance. There's no face you can save. And that's, again, he didn't even play that well with the Rams. He's a good corner. We would consider him one of the best in the league moving forward. But it's you paid, and this is draft season in a nutshell, you paid a certainty price for something that's wildly uncertain.
The point that it underscores, though, is the best point, which is none of this matters if Jared Goff is a top 5 quarterback. Yeah. But if he is a bottom 15 quarterback, it looks really bad really quickly. Let's move on to Stephon Diggs, but before we do, one team that you would love to see trade for Darius Slay.
I mean, in all honesty, like a team like the Bengals.
Oh, interesting.
Because they have the first pick in the second round. I think
you get him for cheaper.
Okay. Because Slay, I mean, he is getting older for sure.
He's getting older.
But you have the first pick in every round, so you could sort of say like, hey, we're only trading a 3rd round pick for Darius Slay, but the team that's getting him is getting basically the last pick in the second round. And the Bengals are not that far away, in my opinion, from actually being decent, right? Burrow, you add Burrow, you maybe sign Robbie Anderson, as we said before, on the 2-minute drill. You get Slay with William Jackson III. Jesse Bates is a pretty good safety. Mm-hmm. You have some guys up front in Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap.
Yeah, he's 29. He'll be in his contract year.
I mean, because that's how far are the Bengals away from contending? They're a ways away from Baltimore, but they're not that far away from Pittsburgh or Cleveland.
I do not hate that. I think there's a team that is closer to contending that I would like to see Darius Slay go to, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles.
I was going to say it over top. Yeah,
it's good. I really believe that they need to attack. This is the type of move that the Eagles should make. Okay, you just paid Carson Wentz. You actually, I think, got Carson Wentz for a decent price. You certainly need wide receiver help. And we're going to talk about Stephon Diggs here in a second. But you could not cover anyone, and you won the Super Bowl because you picked up a guy in Patrick Robinson who all of a sudden could cover some people. You had Ronald Darby, right, who is also a free agent, right? So, they just have not been able to cover of late. The Eagles are the team that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, it's not bad. And they have $44 million in cap space.
They could do some things. I don't know. Let's go to Diggs though, because Diggs, is certainly going to command a way higher price than Darius Slay will. And the Eagles are a team that desperately need some wide receivers. You could see them making a play for Stephon Diggs. The New England Patriots have the 23rd pick. They desperately need wide receiver help. Is the fact that people are getting so excited about the opportunity to trade for Stephon Diggs not a huge red flag to everyone in Minnesota and to all the people working for the Vikings?
Unbelievable. I mean, honestly, and, growing up following the Vikings, this has happened before. Moss was one where they're like, we have no intentions of trading Moss. And then they trade Moss, as I tweeted out the other day, for a draft pick and Napoleon Harris, who's a linebacker for the Raiders. Mm-hmm. They traded, and now, granted, they got a good value for Percy Harvin and probably traded him at the right time, but the same thing happened with Percy Harvin. We're not trading Percy Harvin. He's the best player on our team, blah, blah, blah. They trade him for a number one. And granted, Seattle won the Super Bowl the following year. The thing about Diggs is it makes zero sense to trade him. He has a good contract. He only makes 14 and a half. His cap number is 14 and a half. I mean, that's not an egregious amount. He is a player. So the thing, we talked about this internally the other day. The great thing about Diggs is he's not a one-trick pony. In 2018, he was an underneath receiver and was very good at it. And last season, only one player in the history of PFF has had consecutive 100 target seasons and increased their average depth of target more than Stephon Diggs last year. And he was great at that. So, if you're the Vikings, your problem wasn't that you had too many receivers and this guy's a malcontent. Your problem was you didn't have enough receivers and this guy was carrying your offense. So to go out and be like, look, man, I mean, this will never not piss me off. When Stephon Diggs doesn't get in trouble with the law, he doesn't hit women. He's not a problem. He's a tension, right? He's a tension. And if you can't manage tension, you shouldn't be a coach or a GM in the NFL. Manage the tension. The fact that he wants Kirk Cousins to play better just means he's a good damn receiver.
Wow, that was strong. I'm gonna give you the other side of that, which is the reason that his average depth of target went so much higher is that they leaned into play action last year.
Sure.
And he was, for the most part, the only guy that could make it 15 plus yards downfield in 3 seconds. And so he was the guy that was targeted on those deep shots. And so that was a huge reason why his ADOT, he was targeted so much further down the field, which is to say that he can win down the field. And if you are a smart team, you're running play action, you're targeting him down the field, and you should do that. He led the NFL in deep receiving yards.
Yep.
Targets 20 plus yards downfield. He is, I would say, easily a top 10 wide receiver.
Yes.
And one that does not, as you said, have any baggage. The Minnesota Vikings are playing Olabisi Johnson and Laquan Treadwell at wide receiver. I mean, this is absolutely insane. And here's what it underscores for me. This is why you don't pay Kirk Cousins that much money.
Yeah. Stephon Diggs makes $1.5 million less APY than Sammy Watkins.
It's ridiculous. But here's the thing. If you have, and Tom Brady's the wrong guy to use in this case because no one's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
But if Kirk Cousins has any ounce of leadership in him, I don't think this is happening.
But that's why you don't. So here's a thing, and I'm not trying to make a comparison because because I'm not going to make the comparison even with Bridgewater. But Case Keenum, when he was the quarterback of the Vikings in 2017, no one pulled this shit, right? Because Case Keenum was a bad quarterback, had a good season. But there's a leadership aspect to it, right? And there's a leadership aspect to playing the position that, we capture it indirectly in analytics, right?
Yep.
But Kirk Cousins is a far more talented arm than Bridgewater and Keenum and even Bradford. Diggs didn't pull this shit with Sam Bradford, who's got crazy eyes, right? When you're a mark,
That's really mean.
He comes in and he's been doing this for 2 years. And it's because the quarterback just doesn't come in and say, "Look, man, I'm the one that gives you the football. Have some respect for me." And the fact that and this was true about him in Washington, right? The fact that that was the biggest overlooked thing, aside from the fact of his inconsistencies on the field and his statistics and all that kind of stuff, how he needs a good offense to prop him up. To me, that was one of the biggest things about Kirk Cousins that they overlooked in signing him to this huge deal.
Okay. I don't know that there isn't a team out there who should not call the Minnesota Vikings. I legitimately don't. Now, you're probably not giving up, a top 14 pick? So I'm going through the NFL draft order. And the first team that I come to that really gets my attention, that, talking about, because I'm assuming it's taking a first rounder. You can't possibly be giving him up for a second rounder, can you? But that being said, the Arizona Cardinals at 8, if they offer the 8th pick in the second round, which I think they have, is that getting it done? Okay,
I mean, look, if you go pick 40 and pick 150, yeah, I mean, sure.
Incredible, okay? So that to me is a no-brainer.
And the Vikings are gonna turn that 40th pick into a center. So
kudos, right? The Las Vegas Raiders have a ton of draft capital, right? They should be looking at trading for Stephon Diggs. If the Miami Dolphins get Tua at 5, I'm thinking about trading for Stephon Diggs. I mean, there's not a team that I'm not thinking about this. The Dallas Cowboys, they let Amari Cooper walk.
Diggs is a better player than Amari Cooper.
Yes. So I'm thinking about trying to call.
if you're the Indianapolis Colts and you sign Teddy Bridgewater to a $15 million per year contract and you don't immediately turn around and ask the Vikings for Stephon Diggs, you are silly.
Here's
with that kind of capital.
And here's the point. So this is a very deep receiver draft. And that's great. But if you're a team that is trying to win in the next 2 to 3 years, and you have a first-round pick, and you go, I'm going to take a receiver, trade it for Stephon Diggs. You know Stephon Diggs is good.
Yeah.
And say you're the Philadelphia Eagles at 21. You have Carson Wentz there. You are not looking for Laviska Shenault to potentially be really good. Now, I personally think he's awesome, right? And if I'm a team like, I don't know, the Tennessee Titans or the Miami Dolphins at 27, right? Like, that sounds awesome. But if I am a team with a first-round pick that could use a wide receiver, and every single team can, I'm calling the Minnesota Vikings.
The thing about it is you're paying for the certainty with Diggs' contract, but because Diggs' contract is relatively team-friendly, you're paying far less. I mean, rookie receivers are some of the more, they're scheme-dependent, which we've already talked about. Diggs is relatively scheme-independent. They are just performance noisy, right? And they're quarterback dependent, which again we've seen with Diggs, had success with Bridgewater, had success with Keenum, had success with Bradford, had success with Cousins. Like, again, you're so much more impervious. You dampen the noise so much when you sign Stephon Diggs. So if you're a team like the Colts that has tons of cap space, you could. The thing about the Colts is you could trade for him, tack $1 million or $2 more APY onto his contract, and still be fine, right? And then you have Hilton and Diggs and a pretty good tight end in Jack Doyle, and you're moving offensively, right? And if you sign a quarterback, again, the issue here is just that Diggs flat out does not respect the quarterback, the guy that plays quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, and I don't think that'll ever change. Like once you've made fun of the guy enough, or once you've done the things, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube there.
Here's the thing. Diggs wins above replacement is outperforming the mean for those late first-round draft picks, right? That's like that's what you have to keep in mind, and the wideness of the distribution for those first-round receivers is way wider. In other words, you could have, certainly it could turn into Randy Moss, right? But it could also be a huge bust, right? And so you're narrowing your variance. And if you have a guy like Carson Wentz, and I'm just going to go down the list of teams that have late first-round picks. The New England Patriots, that's a no-brainer. We've talked about it at 23. The New Orleans Saints at 24. You kidding me? Michael Thomas and Stephon Diggs with Drew Brees? What?
And if you have cap space, the marginal value of each additional dollar is less. So if you have a ton of cap space, that's where, again, if you're a team like Minnesota and you don't have cap space, then I get paying for the uncertainty is costly. But if you do have cap space, it's less costly on a per dollar basis.
Yes. Every team except the Green Bay Packers, who the Vikings would probably never trade him to, should be making a phone call. The Ravens, the Niners, and the Seahawks. The Seahawks would be great. Can you imagine that? They won't trade their first for him just because that just doesn't feel like a move that they want to make. But you get my point. Here's how I'll close this out. If the Minnesota Vikings didn't have Stephon Diggs, their 26 pick, they should have been calling whoever had Stephon Diggs to try and trade for him.
And the Vikings should be not the Vikings should be rejecting most of these offers and figuring out a way to manage this tension. And given their history, they won't.
A guy that you wrote about this week is Isaiah Simmons. So we're going to transition now to the draft a little bit. And we're going to do this in reverse order of the way I have it on the sheet. We're going to talk about trades for the Bengals in a second, but I want to make sure we talk about Isaiah Simmons. Because here's a guy who has played 100-plus snaps at like 6 different positions. I mean, the guy's just all over the field. And in today's NFL, the positionless player in coverage on the back end, not playing on the line, is a tremendous asset. Where are you taking Isaiah Simmons? Like, how high are you sitting there? You're going, hey, this guy could be whatever I want him to be. Let me put this guy on my defense. I don't need a quarterback.
Right. I mean, that's the point. I mean, and I'm writing a written article already about Anthony Gordon. In my opinion, this draft has 2 quarterbacks that are worthy of a first-round pick. So, by all means, you do whatever you have to do to take those 2 guys. Or do you have one to begin with? And then after that, you consider the top players at wide receiver, the Ruggses and the Jerry Judys and so on and so forth. The CeeDee Lamb
shade is strong.
And then the Akudas of the world, right? The guys that cover on the outside. And then I think you consider Simmons, right? Chase Young as well, right? Chase Young but then you consider Simmons, and here's the reason. And I've tried. I think we've made this argument a number of times, but I think it's important. Safeties, the bust rate for safeties is small, and here's why. You need a bunch of them, and if one of them doesn't work out in the role that you want them to, they can play something else, right? So take the Chiefs. Tyrann Mathieu was supposed to be signed to be their Earl Thomas, their middle of the field player. And through a bunch of events, one of them being they drafted Juan Thornhill, but the other one was that he wasn't as good at that as he was at playing in the slot. You were able to cobble together a defense worth of valuable players. Kendall Fuller moves to free safety in the playoffs. Matthew plays in the slot. Daniel Sorensen, who's been basically trash his entire career, gets you some value at linebacker. That is, to me, the fact that efficacy at the safety position is almost entirely right skewed. There's very little negative, and there's a ton of positive if you find the right role for this guy. I do think that there's more value in that sort of like linebacker safety hybrid than we've initially thought. And a lot of that stems from the fact that previous iterations of it have just sucked. Mm-hmm. Mark Barron was a guy who couldn't cover and then goes and plays linebacker, and then he can't stop the run or cover there. And so we're like, oh, well, this doesn't really work. Deion Buchanan, okay in coverage, horrible against the run, can't blitz. So then he's, we can't play, right? But like, I think Isaiah Simmons is a little bit different, right? I think his range, he played safety in college to the degree that like indistinguishable from other safety, right? He's not like a linebacker trying to play safety. He's a legitimate safety athlete. Mm-hmm. Very good at rushing the passer. Again, very like Derwin James in that sense.
Yes.
But also,
you brought up the guy that I wanted to bring up, which is, and I remember being, we were sitting in this room a few years ago when the Niners had a chance to take Derwin James, and I was like, my pants were off. I was sweating. I was red-faced. I could not wait. I had my Derwin James 49ers jersey ready to order. They took Mike McGlinchey, and, that tears ensued. But this reminds me of Derwin James. Yeah. And I'm wondering if people will have learned from that and will go, oh, remember the guy that could cover, who played safety, who was also the best pass rusher in the class?
Jamal Adams is the best pass rusher on the Jets team. A Jets defense that is top 10 in the league in yards per play allowed. We don't even Marcus May and Jamal Adams were the first and second pick in the Jets draft 3 years ago. And now that defense is pretty damn good because you have players that can do a ton of things in your secondary, right? Like, the bust potential for a safety is small and why teams should be signing a ton of them. Why it didn't make any sense why guys like Trey Boston has been a free agent into June for like 3 years in a row, and he's been great for every single team that signs him is good. Eric Reed, right? He lasted halfway through the season. He's played linebacker for the 49ers. He played deep safety for the Carolina Panthers. We just talk about Matthew, right? Matthew's a terrific player, and he can do a few things really well, and then you find another guy like Thornhill who can do a few things really well, and you got a pretty damn good secondary. It's why guys like Denzel Ward and Okudah, like they're great draft picks, but the bust potential is really high because they have one thing. They're corners. They're outside corners. That guy's got to succeed at that thing, and that thing is super important. But you understand that
you only have one shot.
There's two tails to that distribution. Yeah. Whereas with guys like that can play safety, especially in the league now, where if any defensive coordinator worth his salt is playing 3 of them at a time, sometimes 4, like the correlations there. I mean, it's anti-fragile to bring up a buzzword. Like there's not a ton of ways you can go completely wrong at the position.
I love anti-fragile. Would you describe your calf as anti-fragile?
No, my calf is extremely fragile. the fibers that make up my calf are fragile.
Very fragile. I mean, in my opinion, the top 3 teams in the draft should be taking a quarterback. Mathematically, the top 3 teams in the draft should be taking a quarterback, and the one that doesn't get one should be trying to trade down. And if you can't trade down, you should be taking Isaiah Simmons. That is my...
Yeah, especially, again, we talk about positions where if you're not, like, how many really good linebackers are there in the NFL? Like linebackers.
Right, there's a handful.
Which is why Devin White, who played pretty well this season, was still not a great draft pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 5 because he has to succeed at being an every down, full down linebacker. If he fails, you're not moving him to slot corner. You're not moving him to deep safety. So, like, that's a pretty, like, you're trying to shoot the moon with that pick, and unless the guy ends up being Kuechly or Warner or Littleton even, and again, Littleton's, like, has a, like, it's a tough pick, whereas there's tons of safeties that contribute positively to their teams.
Couldn't agree more. Okay. There's a really interesting way of looking at the way that this draft could unfold from a trade standpoint that I was thinking about last night, and I'm curious how you view this. So Timo wrote a really great article, PFF_Moo, if you're curious, about what the Redskins should do. And one of the really interesting things that he brings up that we have talked about a bunch is the possibility of choosing between 2 quarterbacks, whichever one works out, right? And this is something that teams are just like very reticent to do. But it's something that, for the Redskins, particularly because you just don't know that much about Dwayne Haskins, is worth doing, right? And if you can pick the best one out of that group, you're in a better spot than if you take Chase Young. But the Bengals don't really have that opportunity, right? So to me, it's very interesting if the Bengals were to trade down and, then the possibility of taking Tua goes away. Are you just saying to yourself, well, we actually we're tanking again, right? Is that really what the trade down says? And in that case, like, I really would need a Godfather offer because I would rather take Burrow now, and if it really doesn't work out, take another quarterback the next year, exactly as a team like the Cardinals or the Redskins could do. Yeah,
the hard part is that there's a couple different ways. There's a couple reasons why the quarterback makes sense here. First off, it makes your team have a better chance of winning, right? Moo tweeted out, and it was great. He talked about this, was having 2 quarterbacks in a position where only one plays curbs the left side of the distribution. Like, because both guys have to suck for you to completely lose at that position. So it curbs uncertainty in one direction. But you're also trying to sell tickets. And I'm sorry, like, Chase Young does not sell tickets, right? Isaiah Simmons doesn't sell tickets unless you got a quarterback, right? And so there's another point of it, whereas, like, you got to generate excitement. Also, bad quarterbacks don't help you develop your team, right? Like we talked about, how having Ryan Fitzpatrick in there was a good way to tank, because at least he was good enough to throw on-target passes to receivers you're trying to figure out about, right?
Sure.
So there's so much, like, I don't like the trade back from one unless it's a humongous offer, because you just send a message that, yeah, I know this last season was painful, and we had to watch Ryan Finley play for like 3 freaking games, and it was garbage. But
this one's going to be worse.
This one's going to be worse, but I promise you next year. Because here's the thing about Trevor Lawrence.
You don't know.
You don't freaking know. Because
if
Justin Herbert would have come out last year, where would he have been drafted?
Right.
A lot freaking higher than where he's drafted here. Did you watch the national championship game? Trevor Lawrence is a good prospect. He was horseshit in that game. He was bad in that game.
Yeah. No,
how do we know? We don't know.
That's why, to me, it's a very different. Talking about the Bengals trading down versus the Redskins or the Lions is just like it's a totally different mindset, and that's why if I'm the Bengals, there's basically no way that I'm trading out of that spot. Then you go to the Redskins and you go to the Lions, and it's very interesting. The odds to draft Tua, Caesars put them out, and the co-favorites are the Dolphins and the Lions. And a lot of people thought we were kind of crazy for talking about how the Lions should take Tua. We both also think that the Redskins should take Tua, but they seem to be, totally there's no way. So then he falls to the Lions, and I just can't. I keep coming back to this makes too much sense, and it forces also the Dolphins now to think about trading up to try and get him.
Here's a question about the Lions people, because we've gotten a lot of messages about what this how can you say the Detroit Lions are a worst to first candidate and also say they should draft Tua? Do we think a player, what is one non-quarterback in this draft that's going to be worth even a win to the Detroit Lions next year? And does that win matter? Because here's the thing. If the Lions are the same team, a 1-win corner isn't going to matter. Who gives if they're 4-11-1 or 4-12 or 5-11? Who cares, right? Like, you got to get out of that basin even to get to 8, 9, 10 wins for the 1 win that Denzel Ward offered the Browns would have mattered. Or
this was the point we made with the Raiders, though, right? So Khalil Mack. Is he a nice asset to have when you're trying to go from 9 to 10 wins?
Right.
Absolutely. But when you're a team that's going to win between 3 and 7 games, him being that great of a player actually just hurts your draft pick the next year, and he doesn't play a position that allows his greatness to catapult you into a position where you're a Super Bowl contender. Similarly for the Lions, this situation that you're looking at over the next few years is dependent on either Matt Stafford having a glorious return, right? Or you're saying, actually, now we're moving on, and we're moving on to a guy that we currently know is a top prospect. You don't know anything about where you'll be next year. This may be your only shot over the next few years to actually get a guy that could be the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah, because if Stafford falls off and can't play again, who gives it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Jeffrey Okudah at corner, or Chase Young, should he fall there, are not making a difference. They're not. If you are starting David Blau, you are winning 3 games.
Exciting. Yep. No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. All right. Let's close out with some draft props and a little XFL week 3. The only draft prop that I saw that was actually remotely interesting so far was over under number of quarterbacks drafted in the first round. And it's at 4.5.
I already bet the under.
Okay. So did I. 4.5. So I guess if you put it, you're saying Herbert's going in the first round. You obviously have the 2 guys we talked about. And then you still need one other guy to go in the first round in order for you to get to 4.
Right. So the clear one, the clear favorites are Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, and then the 2 actual first round picks. But then you're talking, okay, Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm. Anthony Gordon's not going in the first round, even though he's probably better than Herbert and Love. So, this is the Mason Rudolph question all over again, right? 2 years ago when Rudolph was a guy who teams were like, maybe,
Yeah. I'm with you. I think the under is a smart move here, especially because we've seen the narratives for these guys, some of them skyrocket, but I have a hard time seeing Jordan Love, like the love for Jordan Love, to be perfectly honest, really catch a ton of fire just because there's so much else to talk about in this draft. And so I'm not sure that it will skyrocket in a way that says, okay, well now Jordan Love is going to get pushed, to a top 15 pick, and the team that would have taken him in the 20s is like, well, screw it, we got to take.
And you know why?
Take somebody.
And you know why? Under's minus 150, and it should be. I mean, the reason why under is also a good bet is because of all the free agent quarterbacks that are.
True.
So like there are tons, like the team that signs Jameis is going to be convinced that Jameis is their quarterback for another year and a half, and they're going to probably prefer a Jacob Eason in the second. The fact that Drew Lock,
a first round pick on him.
Yeah, the fact that Drew Lock lasted until pick 40 or something last year, I think is emblematic of where maybe the smart teams are sort of thinking about these second-tier QBs, when it's like, yeah, we'll put Will Greer, we'll put an investment in you, but we're going to wait till round 2 or 3. We're going to send our quarterback a message, but we're not going to draft the guy in the first round because it comes, like even like the 10 through 32, the message is that guy's going to start for my team relatively soon. And if you sign a guy like Tannehill, like you don't want to send that message to him. Jameis, I mean, the older guys, Rivers and Brady, maybe, but even then, Brady's not the kind of guy who's going to come in and be like, yeah, I'm going to start here for a year. No, he wants to play for 3 more years.
You brought up this point yesterday, and I thought it was great. You're either a guy that's getting picked in the top 10, or you're probably getting reached on.
Yeah.
So you're either worthy of a top 10 pick, or you're convincing yourself this guy should have been, and I'm going to jump up to 17 to get him, right? Like there's just not that many guys that are worth it. It takes a guy like a Lamar Jackson, who people just didn't even know what the fuck was going on with Lamar Jackson, for that, end of the first round, middle of the first round pick to really be worth it. And I just don't believe obviously none of these guys are Lamar Jackson. So under 4.5, I would pay the price. XFL week 3.
Boom.
Take me through it.
So I think I have found my favorite XFL team. And I said this, so everybody was picking their team. And I said,
try and sell me on it.
And I said, my favorite team is going to be the team that covers. And so I think my favorite team now is the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Okay. Can you tell me why?
Well, I think Jordan Tiamu is a person who looked really good in our statistics, coming out of college.
Okay.
And they have a pretty good defense, and their odds to win the XFL title. So there's 2 teams that are like plus 200 favorites: Houston and DC. St. Louis at 1-1 right now is plus 800 to plus 1,000 or plus 1,000. That's an extremely good bet.
Let me go make an investment here. Thank you for your service. I too am now a what's they're the Battlehawks?
Battlehawks.
What an incredible name. What's a Battlehawk?
My father was talking about how politically correct all the names are. The Houston Roughnecks and the DC Defenders and
no Redskins here.
There's no Chiefs, there's no Redskins, there's no anything that could make anybody upset in the XFL.
All right, so I'm now a St. Louis Battlehawks fan, along with you.
The Show Me State, the great state of Kansas.
Yes. So for this week, there are, let's see. So the St. Louis Battlehawks play the New York Guardians on Sunday at 6. They are 10-point favorites. Are you betting any big favorites, like over touchdown favorites? Are you?
No,
no way, right?
So here's the thing. So the St. Louis was at Houston last week, and Houston, again, was very impressive in week 1. St. Louis was 8-point underdogs. Our colleague Ben Brown said +8 was a good bet. St. Louis they lost outright, but came through the back door and lost by 4. The thing here, so I think all the big spreads, to me right now, this is a dog under league. So Tampa Bay is +6.5 at home against Houston. Dog under league. Seattle is 5-point underdogs at home to Dallas. Again, I think that's too many. No team in the league. So we talk about St. Louis being our favorite team. I still think they should not be 10-point favorites against New York. That has moved up even from 8 to open. So there are people just betting into St. Louis right now. I think New York, if you want to hedge your +800. New York +10 is probably a solid bet. They were shut out 27-0 last week. I think people are overreacting to that. And then My favorite
zigzag theory of gambling.
My favorite pick against the spread this week is the last game on Sunday, I believe, which is Los Angeles plus 8.5 at home against DC. DC has won 2 impressive home games.
Yep.
LA has lost 2 games. But the first game, they didn't have Josh Johnson. The second game was kind of fluky. I think Josh Johnson's still a pretty damn good quarterback for this league, and I think that they can cover the 8.5.
Boom.
Yeah.
XFL Week 3. Get excited. There's really nothing else to watch on television.
No, and it's, again, it's not like if you come in wanting the football to be very good, you're going to be disappointed. If you come in with sober understanding of what the XFL will be, I think it can be entertaining.
Yep. And they've smartly positioned these before the heavyweight fight on Saturday night, which is very smart. So you can bet on these games, and then you can go bet on Wilder Fury. Did you know that was happening? You must have. Oh, pretty big heavyweight fight. Ayers knows about it. Yeah, he's a boxing fan.
Look at that.
Two big. So the funny thing about Wilder Fury, so Deontay Wilder is like a physical specimen of a human being.
Like me.
Exactly. Tyson Fury is this big British dude who is legitimately like blubber. Like when they show the slow motion of him like fighting, you see the ripples in like his body moving. But he's super quick. Like the dude it's hilarious. It's so ironic.
It's like Jermaine Wiggins, a former Vikings tight.
He has just got this wiggle that is incredible, and Deontay Wilder is just this massive dude that could kill someone with a punch. So if you're looking to bet on something on Saturday night, I got you. I have no idea who I'd bet on. Who's the favorite? Wilder.
I don't know.
Let me look this up. This is great content. This is what you're looking for when you come to a football podcast. It is Wilder, and he is... Where is it? Jesus, there are a lot of... he is minus 125. So, slightly. Man. I might go Fury. Just because of his bodily countenance. All right. Do you have any stories from the Y? You haven't been to the Y.
I haven't, so sorry.
Yeah. Bummer.
It does suck.
I don't have any, but I'm very much looking forward to telling some stories from the Indy Marriott gym, which we will be
I
at
might
next
even
week.
make it there next week.
I'm hopeful. If you make it to Indy next week, first off, you should, because the combine is fun, and it's probably the best chance you've got if you're just a random fan of having a beer with someone that matters in the NFL.
Yep.
Like you legitimately can go have a beer with like Sean Payton. Like he's just out there having a good time.
Last year.
You did. We're also doing a live show on Thursday night at Tin Roof in downtown Indianapolis. It's like a block from St. Elmo's. So no matter how inebriated you are, you can make it there. And it should be a lot of fun. Have some good guests lined up. I don't want to tease any before they are like confirmed, and that's just the nature of the beast. They can confirm at the last minute, but a lot of good guests. Should be a ton of fun. One of the guests, I'll let at least one of them out there, Peter King, our good friend, he's going to join us.
Yeah, Peter, one of the best of all time in terms of covering the NFL.
Yeah, he's awesome. And the thing is, you often see Peter buttoned up, because that's the way he is. This is at night from 7 to 9. Peter enjoys a good beer, and so we might talk some beer with Peter King. He's going to teach me something.
I can't wait.
Anyways, that's our show. Peace out, guys.